All right, let's dive into one of the most incredible and honestly underrated structures in all of biology. It's the unsung hero that literally makes life possible, the ultimate bouncer at the club of existence. Today, we're talking about the cell membrane, life's master gatekeeper.
So, what's its secret? How does it do it? Well, it all comes down to one core concept: selective permeability. Just think of it like a super intelligent border patrol. This isn't just some dumb wall. No, it's a sophisticated system that's constantly deciding who gets a passport and who gets turned away, all to keep the inside of the cell perfectly stable and happy. So, how does this gatekeeper pull it off? Here's our game plan. First, we're going to look at the gate itself, what it's made of. Then we'll explore how things get across. You'll see sometimes it's a free ride, and other times there's an energy bill to pay. We'll even check out how it handles these huge special deliveries before we tie it all back to what it means for our own health. All right, first things first. What is this smart gate actually made of? Let's take a look. You know, the gate itself was an absolute marvel of engineering. The main structure is this flexible, double-layered wall called a phospholipid bilayer. You've got these water-loving heads facing out and water-fearing tails tucked safely inside. But it's not just a wall. It's studded with all these proteins that act as the actual channels, the carriers, the pumps. They do all the heavy lifting. And you've got cholesterol mixed in there too, acting like a stabilizer, just keeping everything perfectly fluid. This whole dynamic, ever-shifting setup is what we call the fluid mosaic model. It's not rigid. It's like a bustling molecular sea. So we've got the gate, we've got the bouncers. How did things start to cross the border? Well, the simplest way is what we call passive transport. And you want to know the best part? It's a free ride. The cell doesn't have to spend a single drop of energy. The whole principle here is actually pretty simple. Imagine a totally packed concert hall right when the show ends. What happens when they open the doors? People naturally spread out into the empty space outside, right? Well, molecules do the exact same thing. They move from an area of high concentration, where they're all crowded, to a low concentration, where there's way more room. It's just a fundamental law of physics, playing out in every single one of our cells. Now, this free ride comes in three main flavors. First up, you've got simple diffusion. This is for the really tiny, uncharged molecules, like the oxygen we breathe in and the carbon dioxide we breathe out. They can just slip right through the membrane, no problem. Then there's facilitated diffusion. This is for slightly bigger molecules, like glucose, our cell's main fuel source. They're too big to get through on their own, so they use a special protein channel, kind of like a private doorway. And finally, there's osmosis, which is the super important special case of water itself, moving across to balance everything out. And make no mistake, the power of osmosis is immense, for real. If you take a red blood cell and drop it in pure water, it'll swell up so much that it actually bursts because water is rushing in so fast. But if you put that same cell in super salty water, it'll shrivel up like a raisin as all the water rushes out. It's this incredible, kind of dramatic demonstration of the delicate balance our cells have to maintain every single second. But, moving with the flow, that's the easy part. What happens when a cell needs to push something against that natural current? Well, that's when it has to pay up. This is active transport, and every single passage comes with an energy bill. Okay, so here's the fundamental difference, laid out plain and simple. Passive transport costs nothing, and it always goes with the flow, from high concentration to low. Active transport, it requires energy, this molecule called ATP, because it's forcing things to go against the flow, from low concentration to high. It's really the difference between just floating down a river and having to paddle furiously upstream. And the most famous example of this, the absolute rock star of active transport, it's the sodium-potassium pump. This little protein is a tireless engine in pretty much every cell in your body. It's constantly pumping sodium out and potassium in, and it uses a ton of energy to do this, all to maintain a very specific electrical charge. Why is that charge so important? It's the battery that powers every single one of our nerve impulses. I mean, the very thought you're having right now is only possible because billions of these tiny pumps are working overtime. Wild, right? Now, the cell is also incredibly efficient. It's not going to let that powerful energy gradient it just built go to waste. So, in a process called secondary active transport, it basically uses the strong downstream flow of one molecule to drag a second one along for the ride. In what's called symport, a molecule like glucose literally hitches a ride with sodium as it rushes back into the cell, both going in the same direction. In antiport, the cell uses that energy to power an exchange, swapping one molecule for another in opposite directions. It's this beautiful, clever two-for-one system. Okay, so channels and pumps are great for tiny ions and small molecules. But what happens when the cell needs to bring in something massive, like a whole protein or, I don't know, another cell? For that, it needs a totally different system, bulk transport, which is basically the cell's heavy-duty special delivery service. And the solution is just ingenious. The cell uses what are basically these little membrane-bound cargo containers called vesicles. It can wrap up huge items in these bubbles, move them right across the border, and then release them on the other side, all without ever breaking its main wall. And of course, it's a two-way street. When the cell brings something in, the process is called endocytosis, literally into the cell. The membrane just folds inward and engulfs the material. And when the cell needs to ship something out, that's called exocytosis, or out of the cell. The vesicle full of cargo moves to the edge, fuses with the outer membrane, and releases its contents to the outside world. Now, this bringing it in process has a few different styles. You've got phagocytosis, which literally means cell eating. This is how an immune cell might just gobble up an invading bacterium. Then there's pinocytosis, or cell drinking, which is for taking in little gulps of the surrounding fluid. And then there's the super specific one, receptor-mediated endocytosis. This is like a VIP entrance. Molecules like cholesterol can only get in if they have the right invitation and bind to a specific receptor on the cell surface first. Now, sending things out of the cell. This isn't just about taking out the trash. Not at all. Exocytosis is one of the most important ways our cells talk to each other. Every single time a nerve sends a signal or a gland releases a hormone, it's using this exact process to launch those chemical messengers out into the body. It's the language our cells use to coordinate pretty much everything we do. So we've been way down in the microscopic mechanics of all this, but let's zoom all the way out. How does this intricate little dance inside our cells actually affect our overall health? Well, it turns out the impact is anything but small. It's really the critical question, isn't it? Why does any of this stuff matter? How can a single pump or a single channel, on a scale we can't even imagine, have any real effect on our day-to-day lives? Well, when these systems fail, the consequences can be absolutely devastating. Cystic fibrosis is a tragic example. That entire disease is caused by a defect in a single type of protein channel, which leads to this thick, sticky mucus building up in the lungs. And on a bigger scale, simple imbalances in osmosis, that movement of water, are the direct cause of conditions like edema, which is swelling from excess fluid, and even life-threatening dehydration. But here's the hopeful part. Understanding these mechanisms is the absolute key to modern medicine. Seriously. By learning exactly how cells bring things in, scientists can now design drugs that basically hitch a ride on these natural transport systems. This allows for incredibly targeted drug delivery, getting medicine exactly where it needs to go, while minimizing side effects everywhere else. It's a total revolution in how we treat disease. So in the end, it all comes back to this. This membrane, thousands of times thinner than a human hair, is not just a simple barrier. It's a dynamic, intelligent, essential conductor of the symphony of life, orchestrating the constant, complex movement that makes our existence possible. And that leaves us with one final fascinating question to chew on. For all of human history, this delicate membrane has been the one in charge. But as our understanding grows, we get closer and closer to being able to influence and even direct its processes. So what happens to medicine, to health, to life itself when we finally learn how to control the gatekeeper?